Hello, welcome. It is great to see all of your faces. I am just so absolutely pleased to see you and welcome you to the Harn. I'm Leanne Chesterfield. I have the privilege of being the director here at the Harn for about 5.5 years now, and I pinch myself every day because it really is the most wonderful place with the most wonderful staff and supporters. So I am going to talk very little tonight so that you can get to the main attraction. We're going to have a wonderful talk tonight with our curators and collectors. And following that, we're going to go to the rotunda for food and drink and the exhibition. The entire museum is open for you to enjoy. You can have conversations with each other, with the artists. Many of the artists are here in the flesh, which is very, very exciting. You get to talk to them as well. But without further ado, I have a few things that I would like to say before we get started. It's our pleasure to welcome our co-curators, Gabby Azcuy and David Horta, who will lead us in conversation this evening, along with the Harn's chief curator, Dulce Román. And of course, I am thrilled, as always, to be welcoming Susie and Mitchell Rice and their family and friends, all of you that are here tonight. It has just been an absolute amazing pleasure to have this exhibition here. The students love it, the faculty, the staff, the community, everyone that comes to the museum, which I can I can say the attendance has gone up, and actually we're breaking records that the museum's never had before. We're going to see at least 120,000 people this year alone. So I'm very excited about that. Exhibitions like this take an army of people, and we don't have an entire army. We have a fantastic group of staff. So I want to thank the staff. And they're also possible because of sponsorships, because people are very generous from our community. Of course, Mitchell and Susie are very, very, very generous. And I have a few other people that I'd like to take a moment to thank as well. The Jesse Ball DuPont Fund, Ken and Laura Burns, Fine Farkash and Parlapiano, PA, Visit Gainesville, Alachua County, the Bryson Foundation, Gail Olson, Rick and Osa Thompson, Wells Fargo Foundation, Barbara N. Anderson, Maggie Labarda and John Cherry, Manny and Mercy Kiragua, Cox Communications, the Latin Art Corps, Dr. Art Consultant LLC, and other generous donors. Thank you so much to them. Along with the Cuban Arts Group, this just wouldn't be possible without them. And again, I want to thank Susie and Mitchell. And with that, I'm going to now turn it over to our chief curator at the Harn, Dulce Román.
Thank you, Leanne. It's my pleasure to introduce our panelists this evening. I'm going to give a brief introduction to each of the people here up on the stage, and then we'll start with our questions for our panelists. So at the far end is David Horta. He is an independent curator, writer, and lecturer with experience as a film curator, an archivist, an editor, and he's a published translator. He's worked for public and private cultural institutions, collections, and publications, and has curated a dozen art exhibitions in galleries and museums in Cuba as well as in the United States. And he is currently an associate curator and advisor for the Cuban Arts Group and for Latin Art Corps, Inc. And next to David is Gabby Azcuy. She is an art curator, a cultural manager, an editor, and a lecturer. Her curatorial work extends beyond Cuba with exhibitions in the United States, France, and Spain. In 2016, she began her tenure as a curator for the Cuban Arts Group and the Rice Collection, where she currently holds the position of chief curator. Her collaboration with these two organizations has led to more than 30 art exhibitions and events. And both Gabby and David are the co-curators of the exhibition Under the Spell of the Palm Tree. And then, of course, we have our collectors, Susie and Mitchell Rice, who are here with us. They started collecting Cuban art following their first trip to Cuba in 2013. That visit was a pivotal experience in their vocation as collectors over the last 10 years. Today, the Rice Collection includes, I think, about 300 works, representing more than 95 artists from different generations and aesthetics, and many of those are on view today in the exhibition. In 2015, Susie and Mitchell founded the Cuban Arts Group. It's a nonprofit foundation, and it's dedicated to enriching and strengthening cross-cultural connections through the arts of Cuba. Through their work as collectors and with their foundation, Cuban art has become a gateway to embrace the heart of Cuban culture and its people. So we are so pleased to have the four of you here with us tonight. We're going to ask some questions and have an interesting and vibrant dialogue, and then we hope at the end we can open up for a couple questions from the audience. So the first question is for Susie and Mitchell. What led you to found the Cuban Arts Group?
Before we begin, I just wanted to take a moment to thank everybody that is here tonight, and especially thank the Harn Museum team, because they've been incredible to work with. And Gabby and David and Dulce and Leanne, really you've made this so seamless for us, and we've enjoyed every moment. And I just wanted to take also the moment to thank my friends and family that are here, and all of you that are here from the local community as well. We have 30 people here from Texas to South Florida, and I'm really appreciative. So thank you. Sorry. Oh.
Good.
Okay. The Cuban Arts Group.
So what led you to found the Cuban Arts Group?
You want me to take that one?
Go ahead.
So I want to acknowledge friends of ours, Mike and Janet Cass, who are here in the audience, and I appreciate you coming. Sort of serendipitously and randomly, Mike and Janet were part of a group planning a trip to Cuba that Susie and I knew nothing about. And one couple, it was members of our synagogue in Tampa, were taking a trip back in 2012 and 13 to travel to Cuba. You had to be part of a people-to-people mission and have a purpose to go. So they'd organized a trip from our synagogue, and a couple dropped out. And Mike bumped into Susie and said, "Hey, you guys want to go to Cuba?" And Susie and I discussed it. Sure, why not? And so that's literally how it happened. And it was about 60 days later, there we were. And we spent a week there touring. When you go to Cuba, you travel on a bus with a government-sponsored tour guide, and they take you where the government wants to take you and to see what they want to show you. And that was good, and it was interesting, but of course, we were interested in more. Susie and I had been, I would say, casual collectors of art, contemporary, emerging artists, nothing really to speak of, but just to put interesting art on our walls. So we were intrigued to meet some artists, and on that trip, we visited one artist studio who, Abel Barroso is his name, and one of his works is featured in this exhibition. And from that, and a few other artists, we visited their studios and purchased a couple of pieces on that trip. We were so intrigued by Cuba that the following year, we wanted to take our children, we have 3 children, 2 of whom are here tonight, on a trip to Cuba. So the following year, over New Year's week, actually, we went on a second trip. Leading up to that trip, Susie did an amazing amount of research on artists and really learned so much. I was busy working at work, and I really didn't even realize all that she had done. And on that trip, we broke away from another government-sponsored tour and visited an artist 3 hours outside of Havana in Pinar del Rio. The tour guide had trepidation because he had been known to be somewhat marginalized by the government because of the subject matter of a lot of his work. And that was Pedro Pablo Oliva. And we really had to swim upstream to get to his studio. It was an hour from where we were, and nobody was. But for those of you who know my wife, she's a pretty determined woman. And we were going to go there. We didn't know what we'd find when we got there. And who we found was David Horta. In addition to having incredible, for those of you who walked the gallery with us just now, you can hear just this depth of knowledge and understanding. It is incredible. He's also the son-in-law of that artist. And so he received us. We didn't see the artist in his artist studio, but David, we thought we'd be there an hour or so, maybe 4 hours we spent. And the works were so interesting. And David I can't even describe the stimulation of thoughts and ideas. And our kids were there, and it was like, holy cow, this is really amazing. And on that trip, we visited about 7 or 8 artists. I'll tell you one quick story. On the first day of that trip, the tour took us to the National Museum, the Cuban in Havana. It's an incredible museum with just a wealth of works. There was a temporary exhibition going on there of some spectacular works of an artist, Eduardo Ponjuan. The name meant nothing to me, but we were really intrigued. There were a few we liked a lot. 5 days later, we were in his kitchen, in his home, which is also his studio. In Cuba, there are not art galleries. The artists work in studios, and if you have a chance to see them, you visit them in their homes. And we actually acquired one of the works that was on display in the exhibition in that National Gallery, and it's also on display here. And this is kind of the story of getting close to living masters and amazing artists, and just learning as we go. It was really a spectacular experience. And we went on to make several more trips to Cuba, each with motivation to meet new artists and different artists. And this is leading to the question, what founded it? But it's all of this. This is what led to it. Meeting these artists in their homes, it's so approachable, and hearing their stories and the explanations of their works. We just felt like we want to do something, because this is now 2014, 2015. Communication is a challenge. Travel for these artists is a challenge. Finances are a challenge. And we just felt their energy, their creativity, and their talent. And my wife is amazing. And she said, I want to help these people because their story needs to be told. And she had this vision to create a not-for-profit to give visibility and access and promote, sponsor them to go places and to exhibit their works. And that is really the genesis of Cuban Arts Group. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that, but it was also for me that we had met so many incredible artists and curators and people along the way, and I just felt that, as Mitchell just said, their story needed to be told. And if whatever we could do to make that happen, that's what we wanted to do. So actually, the first exhibition we put together was in Tampa at the University of Tampa, and David was the curator. I actually didn't know Gabby at the time, but it was an incredible exhibition because we didn't want just to bring some art so everyone could see and David could explain. We wanted to bring the artists, we wanted to have lectures, we wanted to have movies, wanted to encompass as much as we possibly could to make it a very comprehensive exhibition. And so that was the beginning of the Cuban Arts Group.
What aspects of Cuban art make you most excited as collectors?
For me, it's really the connection with the people that we've grown to know and love. And we have very strong relationships with a lot of artists, and Gabby and David, and they've really, this has been transformational for me. And it really became an incredible journey. So for me, it's about, I always love to learn and I love to study new artists and even deceased artists. I mean, it started in a very simple way, and I really only knew what I was able to see. So I really had to dig. And so for me, I love the journey of learning and meeting people and the connections I've made.
You know, I'll say this. I think of myself as a pretty ordinary guy. And I'm aware, say, for example, there are auction houses like Christie's and Sotheby's. We've heard of those places. And you see those on TV when a Van Gogh or a Picasso trades for, a king's ransom of money. I never imagined myself in an auction house with a paddle buying art, mostly because I didn't feel I knew enough to even be a qualified bidder. Was I going to get a good deal, a bad deal? I didn't know. But as we've learned and been advised by, at the time, David and Gabby, and Israel Malero, who's here, giving us tremendous guidance, it's exhilarating and exciting and fun to be sitting in the room in Christie's, and some of the pieces in this exhibition were acquired that way. So to be in Cuba, and people say, wait, how do you you can go to Cuba and leave with art? I mean, you can take a canvas, roll it in a tube, and take it on your arm, and fly back to Tampa, and bingo, the art is there. It's really that easy. So some of the art was acquired in Cuba, in the artists' homes and studios, some through auctions, some through galleries. And it's just It's exhilarating. It's energizing. It's a labor of love. I mean, for those of you who've been to this gallery and those who will, these are all works that hang in our home, in our office, because we just need walls to hang it because it's more fun than paying to store it, you know? But when I see it all displayed like that, it's somewhat overwhelming and just reflecting 10 years of a journey, and a really fun one.
So it's been 10 years since you started, and you've amassed this incredible collection. What are your plans looking forward? What do you see happening in the future?
Well, I can't wait to hear this.
Well, of course, we want to continue our journey with Cuban art. It's not to preclude any other types of art, but I think that we haven't been to Cuba since before COVID, and we're very much looking forward to going back there this winter, albeit a very different place than we've experienced. But I think our future, we take things often day by day and see what comes our way, but we are fully intending to continue to collect Cuban art and maintain and find new relationships with Cubans and others that are involved in Cuban art. And anybody that is interested in Cuban art or an exhibition, of course, we want to talk to those people in the United States, which Gabby's doing an incredible job of.
Well, I want to come back to what advice you have for those who want to follow the path that you've taken, but maybe we'll come back to that in a little while and talk with Gabby and David a little bit next. Can you tell us about your role helping Susie and Mitchell to build this collection of Cuban art?
Well, I have worked with Susie and Mitchell since 2016, and in the last years I have been doing more curatorial work, but I would like to refer to the beginning, to all the management of the collection. And when I started in 2016, the first things we did, at the time, the collection has 3 years. So the first things we did was, you know what, we need to cataloging all this collection. That's the first step. And I have to say that I have, it's a person that she's not here. I think she's here in the audience, but it's the person that has helped us the most with the collection. That is Kim Johnson, and she was, she's essential and crucial in everything.
There's Kim.
So together with her, that she already was in those 3 years that I wasn't there, she was archiving everything that was happening with the collection. We found the best database for us to start putting all the information there. We started with the basics, dimensions, technique, title, but then we decided, we need to go deeper in this. We need to talk with each of the artists, because at the time, the collection was just of living artists. And we need to talk with the artists, ask them their statements about these pieces, then research, these pieces have been exhibited how many times? Was something written about this? Let's find all that information and put it in this database. And then let's start writing ourselves about these pieces. But also, this piece is not, it's not by itself, this specific piece of an artist. We need to know what else was happening with that artist at the time. We need to research the series of work that he was doing, or if it was a specific period of his career. So at the end of that first year, we had such a professional base that we were able from that moment on to talk so directly with institutions. And I still remember on March 2017 when we did our loan to the Bronx Museum, and then later to with the Kennedy Center in Washington. That hard work of the beginning really is the base of what we have done today here in the exhibition with Under the Spell, and gave us the base to continue developing the collection, because that's the same pattern we have continued with all the work we have acquired before. And from there, Susie and Mitchell already knew, okay, this is what we have, this is what we know about this collection, let's grow. I think 2017 is the year that the collection has grown the most after that first organization. So I think that's, for me, one of the most rewarding things that we have done.
So my friend Mitchell here, I think when he told this anecdote of them, going away from the tour, like 30 minutes away, and just by pure chance, by pure luck, finding me at the studio of Pedro Pablo Oliva and spending 4 hours there, I think that he's already established that I am the one who talks. So I'm kind of an advisor, they say. I'd rather see myself as a friend who eventually, following their motivation, their interest, their curiosity, eventually became a professional advisor for the Cuban Arts Group. But that's what I have done for their collections. It's just talking, having conversations, trying to help them acquire the tools for much deeper understanding of Cuban culture. So it's not only talking about the works and how beautiful they are, but the context beyond that. And that introduction, and it was only an introduction because they took their own path, and that was the idea. I mean, I told them I don't want to guide you. I just want to maybe advise you and give you the tools for you to discover your own collection. And I think that was my role. I wouldn't go beyond that. And then working side by side with Gabi, which was the greatest acquisition of the collection so far. Really, because not only she's smart, she's knowledgeable, but she's like the best organizer you could have. Like in our conversations were very informal in a way, and the collection started growing from different perspectives, different angles. But then Gabi came, and she has this the mind of an organizer, and she said, no, let's catalog everything, let's go, and so that's pretty much my involvement with the collection, which eventually developed in a friendship, which I'm very happy about.
David, can you and Gabby share some highlights with us about your work helping the collection grow over the last 10 years? Specific experiences or highlights that come to mind?
I think I wouldn't like to speak about specific, highlights meaning artworks or studios or artists, but moments of specific moments of the collection. I think that the first highlight was, and that speaks, pages about, as Mitchell and Susie asked Collector, was precisely that second trip when they decided that they would not go with the flow. They would just not follow the established narrative, of tour guides and all that. And they made their own research. They started by doing what every collector should do. They started learning about it first. And so it's just a mixture of discovery, of chance, curiosity, but then of research and actually understanding what it's all about. And so they decided to go their own way. And so that was the first highlight, I would say. They started trying to go deeper into Cuban culture and Cuban art, understand it, establishing relationship with artists. It's not only to go into seeing the work on the wall and deciding I like this, but I want to see more. I want to know who did this. What's beyond what I see, right? And I would say the second highlight, Gabi pretty much talked about it, right?
I think it's the exhibition you create at the Growing Up in Neverland, the exhibition at the University of Tampa, because at that moment, because for us, you see the collection, we don't see the collection just as the art, but also all the work they do, all the work with the Cubans, a group for us is also the vision of theirs as collectors. So that first exhibition, that you create at the University of Tampa, Growing Up in Neverland, was the first time, they did the whole process. It wasn't just collect, they coordinate with the institution. They brought the artists from Cuba to Tampa. They prepare conversations. So I think that was another important highlight of the importance of communicating with artists, to create a friendship with them, to have a common space and talk. I think that was a very important highlight.
Then there's this I wouldn't say a change in method, but simply adding methods. It's like they went through different layers of understanding of their own collection and of Cuban art itself, from this more intuitive relationship with the artist and the arts, and then the personal involvement in the artist's work, going to the studios, talking to them, understanding their backgrounds, etc. Let's call it, this is kind of a discovery, a layer. And then there came also the moment when they started understanding not only Cuban art, but the art field as a much complex scenario, understanding the cultural institutions, auctions, galleries, how they work, navigating through all that, all the nuances, all the things that are sometimes not easy to understand at first. And then when they started to, widen the scope of the collection, not only to artists they knew because they had this kind of personal attachment to artworks because they met the artist, but then when they started learning about Cuban art and started acquiring books and reading, and then they started collecting artworks from dead artists from other times, and they started going to auctions and acquiring in galleries. So this was a different step, and then let's call it awareness. So there was a discovery first, then there was awareness, and then there was commitment, there was engagement when they created the Cuban Arts Group and decided that they would not only have the collection, they would not only acquire artworks, but they wanted to share with the public. They wanted to share their discoveries. They wanted to share what they felt, what they thought, and they wanted to help promote Cuban art because of all the reasons they have already stated. I won't go over it, but I would say that these three what we call it highlights, and I talk about moment, but it's pretty much
This is a great transition to my question for both of you, which is to tell us more about the Cuban Arts Group and what the foundation has accomplished while you've been working so hard for so many years now with the group. What are some of the highlights from the last decade?
Like Mitchell was saying at the beginning, was created in 2015, and the first events that happened were in 2016. Until today, we have collaborated with 41 projects, different kind, the exhibitions, books, magazines, the screening of documentaries, scholarships, music concerts. So having a variety of events. We have sponsors. Sometimes we have been the ones creating the event from scratch, doing everything. Sometimes we just sponsors in different ways, not just monetary. Sometimes also artists, what look for us is advising, consulting, helping with promotion. And the thing that we have been seeing in the last 3 years is that with the developing of the Cuban Art Group, we have created a very legit entity that now all the cultural Cuban network takes very seriously. So we receive almost daily emails and questions of artists that look up to us for all kinds of things, like, I have this exhibition proposal. Do you think that this exhibition could go to this place? Oh, and we commented on that or said, we would really like to reach to this museum or this institution, but we don't know how. Can you help us? Or for example, during COVID, that the visual arts, have to move to the online space, we start receiving so many questions about how to do augmented reality exhibitions, virtual reality exhibitions, or how to get into the metaverse. And we needed to educate ourselves on that, but we really were so grateful that we helped so many artists and exhibitions to make that possible. And now these exhibitions live, in the web. And it was, to wake up every day and see these all these questions and these commenting and taking us into consideration is really rewarding. But I think the best thing about what we have done in the Cuban Art Group is that Susie planted on us that everything is possible. So you don't have I can answer. So things that you think that you can't do, you will do it. So that is the way we go to do everything. And so nice for all the artists we collaborate with, because we don't have a no. We will talk with that institution, doesn't matter how. So that's also the spirit that we really love of the Cuban Art Group.
David, did you have anything to add?
It's difficult to add anything. Maybe just that sometimes the work of the Cuban Arts Group and of Susie and Mitchell as collectors goes deeper and beyond what is, what you can see. There are these exhibitions that are, very, let's say, more conspicuous. So they're publicized and all. But then they have helped so many artists and so many people with, small gestures like buying an artwork, because they know that that will help the artist keep on producing, or they will, somehow finance or support an exhibition. And it doesn't bear the name, the Cuban Arts Group, but it is there in a way. So I think that Gabby has covered everything. You can see that she's on it, really. But I wanted to add that. I mean, it's a whole system.
And also, if you are interested, if you can go to our webpage, and there we have made a memory of each of the events we have collaborated with. So there you can see everything we have done in these 8 years.
Let's come back to hearing from Susie and Mitchell again. And I think this is a question that a lot of people in the audience probably have as well. What advice do you have for new collectors of Cuban art?
Well, I mean, you often hear, buy what you love, and that's the baseline. I mean, I think that's really important to enjoy what you're looking at and have some passion about it. But I think before that, I always think that doing some research and really understanding the artist and the intent, if you can, because art is always what you interpret, but it really helps you solidify a decision. And so my approach is always to really understand. I mean, sometimes you'll happenstance on something and you'll think fabulous and I have to have it, and you just you don't have to think much about it. But I always like doing some research and really understanding what we're getting involved with.
Mm-hmm. Mitchell, you have thoughts?
I call them bumper stickers. They're kind of cliches or sayings that I live by. And people that we work with and my children, they hear me say this all the time. The harder you work, the luckier you get. And I mean, hopefully our passion and our interest, and if you'll walk through that gallery in 10 years, that was accumulated. And I think I say this in a boastful way, but just it's true. We could fill that room again, so it's really been a labor of love. We've really worked hard at it. So advice to collectors, give that a shot. No, I would say just get involved, kind of head first. And the Cuban experience, the Cuban art experience we talked about, it's been so approachable. The artists are available. Maybe that's the case with other art. This is the path that we've chosen. I mentioned we were casual collectors of emerging artists in New York City galleries. The artists weren't present. A gallerist was there and described the art. And if we liked how it looked and we thought the story was interesting, we'd acquire a piece. It's very different when you are sitting, as I say, in the artist's kitchen and he's explaining his experience or the politics that led him to, create this work or that. And so advice, if it's advice for collecting Cuban art, find a way to book a trip, do a little bit of research, and go meet artists and jump right in.
Yeah, I think your collection and the exhibition is such an inspiration to so many people. And I know that your family has also been involved. And I think it would be interesting to hear if you have inspired your children to also follow your path, either in collecting art or collecting other types of art. What can you tell us about?
Well, one child, I won't name which one, and I'll have to be careful not to put a gender to it because then they would know. Sometimes wondered if we love those children more than our own. Those being the artworks, because it really, for this intense period of time, was a lot of time. We made, I don't think it was mentioned, but I believe we were counting and debating maybe 14 trips to Cuba over that time, just for various reasons and mostly just on quests to meet and meet artists. So we've certainly, I was going through photographs and I came across a video. My son Sam came to an auction at Sotheby's. They have this video of him raising a paddle and buying a piece of art. He didn't know after he raised the paddle that he had to pay for it. But it was really fun and exciting. And I mean, at the time, maybe he was 19 years old. And I mean, what an amazing experience that was. So we've certainly planted the seed, and it's a big part of our life. And I certainly hope that they'll continue with that.
And not to mention that it's Julie Rice, who often wondered if we love the work.
Oh, you blew it.
But no, it's okay. I'm saying this because she's here tonight. And what has been incredible for me to witness is she has developed her own relationships with a lot of the artists. And the other day I was talking just Stereo, I'll call you out. And she said, oh, I said, maybe you could drive up with Stereo. She said, no, because he's leaving on Saturday. I want to come on Friday. I'm like, how do you know? She said, because he was here yesterday. So she has a bunch of Cuban art in her apartment, and she really loves it. And I think that the seeds have been planted, and I'm thrilled to say that. So.
Wonderful. Well, if you don't mind, we could take some questions from the audience, and we have some helpers who will have microphones to pass around. If you have questions for Susie, Mitchell, Gabby, David, about anything you've heard today or anything you saw in the exhibition, maybe.
I don't know much about Cuba. Where do these artists spring from? What training do they get? How does this
That's a great question.
art come from? Where do these artists come from?
Yeah. Great question.
Well, well, all the artists are Cuban, but who is Cuban and what is to be Cuban is a complex, answer. Most of the artists from, this first time of the collection I told you about were artists still residing in Cuba, most of them. So they went to the studios, they found this art. There was no other way, or probably very few other ways to find those artists and those artworks. But then they started seeing Cuban art beyond the frontiers of the island, let's say. And many of these artists are now, scattered all around the world, like artists who live in Spain, in Mexico. Many of them are part of a Cuban immigrant community in the United States. And when it comes to the, to their training, most of them had academic training. And this is something interesting and probably can explain, how they came to be such great artists when it comes, to techniques and all. And the fact is that in Cuba, and this is something, that may seem contradictory, which is a very poor country, as we know. Art training throughout the 60s, the 70s, and way into the 80s, lasted for 11 years. So you went to school early when you were like in what was it, like fifth grade, and then if you made it, you went to what you call here, I think, like high school. So there was 3 years training, 3 more years training, and then if you were very good, you were selected for the Higher Institute of Arts, which is 5 more years of training. So we're talking about 11 years of training, which explains this, contradiction between such a poor country which has produced such great art and such diverse. But this is not only during those decades. Most of the artists that are also in the exhibition that produced mainly during the first and the second avant-garde waves, all the way to, from the late 20s to the late 50s. They also had academic training, not only in Cuba, but also in Paris, New York. So this.
Are there restrictions from the U.S. on how much money you can spend? And does the artist get all of the money?
The most restriction is how much money we have. We have less money, but a richness that I can't really replace with dollars. It's an interesting process. And to your question, if you'd asked me 11 years ago, I would have had no idea. And there's an amazing trust because there's not a banking system in Cuba. So if your question is there a limit to how you spend or how you transact the art, maybe? In our first trip or two, we'd meet someone, we'd shake hands, they talk about the art, we say we like that. They would have to go to the Ministry of Culture, and produce a certificate of authenticity, which was also more or less permission to take the art out of Cuba, because the Ministry of Culture wants to know what art is leaving the island, and if it's of certain politically sensitive topics, then they might not grant it. You take that certificate, the canvas under your arm, and then they say, when you get home, wire us the money. And it was really an amazing experience of trust. And then these artists would have bank accounts in Panama or in Madrid or places where they can conduct their business. And there's really not a dollar limit or anything like that. It's a real trust.
You also have to pay import tax when you import them as well.
Sales tax
Yeah.
in Florida, we found out. Well, I will say this, sorry. Another interesting thing we learned, and I mean, there was some trial by fire. So I said to buy a piece, take it under your arm and take it on the airplane with you. But some of the pieces were too large for that, or sculptures, it wasn't possible. So the artist would create a crate for it and then ship it from Cuba to us in Tampa. But there are no politically permissible direct ways to ship from Cuba to Tampa. So Copa Airlines has a cargo, and they're in Panama. So it would go from Cuba to Panama, and then Panama to generally Orlando. Or Virgin Cargo has flights with cargo from Havana to London, and then to the States, or to Canada. And then the border in Canada, one time we were waiting for a piece of art for a show, and the Canadian border decided they didn't want Cuban art coming through anymore. So we were literally waiting for a piece. Upon one piece, the piece that I mentioned from the first visit to the National Museum, and we purchased the work, it took weeks and weeks because they just wouldn't release it. So shipping art was a very different experience than carrying it ourselves. And one time I went to the FedEx cargo in Tampa to pick up a piece of work, and the man at the counter could see it came from Cuba. And people have very interesting and some passionate ideas about Cuba, good and bad. And I went to pick the work up, and he said something to me like, well, I don't know if I can say it really. I mean, it was something to the effect of, and what are you doing with that anyway? Or like really passing judgment that we were buying art from Cuba. I said, well, we like it. You know, I mean, he couldn't keep it from me, but he had opinions, and he was not excited that we were, you know, spending money there because they feel otherwise. And, you know, that was something, if this is interesting, I'll share. Some friends of ours and people we know were critical that we were going and spending money in Cuba because politically they didn't stood for. And what I explained, which you've heard the theme of this Cuban arts group and why, I explained, listen, I get it, and I'm no fan of communism and the oppression that goes on in that government and on its people. But we found a way. Sure, when we would go and stay in a hotel, the government would take a scrape and they made some money on our, but the impact we made on the artists and the individuals by spending money and being there and supporting them and collecting from them is so much more meaningful than whatever pittance the government made on us, that I would be happy to discuss that, you know, with anyone that was challenging us going to Cuba. And it's just, these are just more of the sort of tentacles of the experience.
So as good friends of Susie and Mitchell's, we've had the opportunity to have front row seats to this voyage, much like we have this evening. And actually, we had the pleasure of going on a trip with you guys, one trip only, but it was with Doug and Maureen, and it was something I'll never forget. But my question is, it seems like the pace of your acquisition has decreased, and maybe Mitchell, you have run out of money, and I do feel bad for that, but the pace seems to have decreased. And so the question is a little bit about that, but more about what's the status of, and maybe you all can comment, what's the status of travel to Cuba, acquiring art from Cuba? We haven't made a trip since, and I don't think you guys have been there in a while. So what can somebody comment on what's going on today in terms of travel, buying art, and things like that?
I'm taking it.
Do you want to give it a shot?
Well, traveling to Cuba is a little bit more difficult right now than, you know, when they used to go there, like, you know, every other year. The conditions to get artworks out of the island, though, remains the same. So it is the same. And just a comment, it's not that Cuba doesn't have a bank system. It's just that it doesn't work for this kind of stuff. It really did. Well, for very few things, but that's my view anyway. And so it's interesting that the same conditions apply today. So nothing has changed except for the fact that it's more difficult to travel right now. You know, there are travel restrictions, and these programs like people to people and all, they have substantially decreased with the passing of years. You know, there was the Trump administration. We had a different perspective, a different approach to this, and then right now it hasn't changed actually much. So, but it's also even difficult for Cubans to travel right now. Like a lot of airlines, for instance, have withdrawn from, I stopped traveling to Cuba. And yeah, it's a little bit harder. Then there, in the last 5 years, they have been a huge exodus, a stampede, if you will, of not only Cubans. I mean, you have heard almost 300,000 in the last 3 years arrived to the southern border and escaping the horrible conditions and repression, which has gone, up. But also artists, because there's little chance to not only to prosper, but to do what you want to do. I mean, there's a scarcity of art materials. There's no market. The very few, local art collectors. Yes, they existed. I mean, there were people in Cuba that actually collected art. They all went away. So there's no source of revenue. There's no art institutions are in decline. So there's little chance to actually exhibit your own work. And still somehow they're still creating wonderful art. Because just like Jose Marti used to say, poetry is pain. So there's a source, there's fuel to keep on working. But then accessing, having access to those works and acquiring them, even though the conditions are the same, is different because of all this. But there's a way. I'm sure there's a way. I can find that out for you. Sure.
I mean, I know that you can go similar to the people-to-people trips. You can go there, and there's a lot of YPO groups that have been going, but it's not. I think the country is. I think it's a bit more challenging to navigate than we were there, even from the first time it opened up. But I think that you can go there, and if there's a will, there's a way, and that's why we're planning to go back again in February. But we hadn't been there in many years, also because of COVID. We were there right before COVID, and then we haven't returned. And over that time frame, I think everything, for many reasons, declined. And then, of course, the relations with the U.S. Didn't help anything.
Dulce, do we have time for one more question?
Or last
One more question. I'm sorry, your hand was up earlier. You're going to pass it back? Okay.
Oh, Mitchell answered.
So I have to ask David, because you're the son-in-law of Oliva. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
How is his health? He was fragile when I saw you last, and I know he has Parkinson's, but he paints away. Is he still doing well?
He's doing well. I mean, like he's stable in a way. And what's really a miracle is that he's still working, not at the same pace, but he's still working. He's still producing, which is amazing. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm so glad to hear it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts from our panel? That flew by. I have so many more questions. I'm going to hold them until I have a drink to hold. And I would love for you to join us in the rotunda, which is right next to the gallery. Please continue the conversation with each other, with our panel. Thank you so much. We're going to let you off the hook now so you can go and relax a little bit.
Get a drink.
Again, thank you so much for coming, and I'll see you in the rotunda.